The sea off Dorne lay flat and bright as a hammered coin, the light so clean it made every rope and rivet glisten. Through it all the green blood slipped out of its cradle, a dark thread drawn through the heat haze, bringing the scent of marsh and fruit groves and silt baked by a sun that did not forgive. She watched it from the forecastle with her hair unbound and the wind sifting salt through the silver-white strands. The sailcloth above snapped like flags in a temple court. Somewhere behind her, a dragon's wing cut air with a sound like great cloth torn in two. When she lifted her hand, a shadow slid across the ship's deck, vast and blade-shaped, and men glanced up despite themselves, faces blanching even when they remembered they were allies to the beast and the woman who commanded it. She did not raise her hand again. She wanted the first sight of Dorne to belong to her eyes, not to the fear of those under her. "You can taste the sand," Missandei said, soft at her shoulder. "Not on your tongue, my queen, but on your skin. It will cling to everything," Daenerys answered. The heat was of a different kind than Meereen, less oil and dung and smoke, more the steady, oppressive certainty of an old sun. "I grew up with deserts, but not with rivers like that one." "The green blood," said Ser Barristan from behind them, the wind teasing the white of his hair. "The Rhoynar call their great river mother. They fled along the Greenblood's back when they crossed. Their water priests still bless it." "Do they?" She looked to the mouth of it, where a tumble of stilted houses knitted together over the mud and reeds, all planks and patched sails, with lines of laundry strung from pole boats to pilings like bunting. The planky town, Quentyn had called it, as if it were a jape. Its poles creaked and swayed when the swell rolled in from the summer sea, and brown children sprinted barefoot along walkways as slender as spear's hafts, sending gulls shrieking upwards. Farther inland, the Greenblood's banks wrinkled with orchards and dusty roads, and then beyond came the low, bleached bones of the Red Mountains. Quentyn stood near the rail, watching as intently as she did, a hand braced against the rigging. He was not handsome. He was sun-browned and wind-chafed and earnest in a way that had seemed guileless when she first met him in Meereen, and later steadier than that, like a weight you could trust to hold a tent in a storm. He had knelt to her then with the sand in his hair, his friends flanking him, Jairus with his sly smile and Archibald a great boulder of a man, and said the words he had carried over half the earth. A prince of Dorne should have dazzled. Instead he had been quiet. She had found she preferred quiet to the blaze of men who burned hot and left ash. His eyes were on the river. "My mother brought me to the water gardens when I was small," he said without looking at her. "In summer, when it was too hot to sleep without the fountains singing. My father did not come often. He said it made his knees ache to sit still." The smile was an afterthought, there and gone. "Dorne looks flat from the sea, but it has edges you can't see. It changes fast once you leave the sand." "I have no wish to leave the sand quickly," she said. She let her gaze find Drogon, a black scythe against light. He was circling because she had asked him to circle, not land. He had learned obedience, imperfect, impatient, but it was there. Rhaegal and Viserion were farther inland already, moving along the coastline where the thermals rose. She felt them more than saw them. A hot prickle at the base of the skull for Rhaegal, an itch between the shoulder blades for Viserion, a thread of fear she refused to name for Drogon, because when she named it the magnitude of what she was doing rose up like a dune and threatened to slide loose. She would wear a wedding crown before she wore a battle crown in this land. It had not been the way she imagined crossing a sea she had been promised since childhood. When Viserys' terrifying, ravening hunger for home colored everything she touched. She remembered Kaith's veiled words beneath Meereen's braziers, the scent of ash and spice. To go west, you must go south. To reach your heart, you must take it in a place the sun drinks bare. She had learned to hear prophecy as problem rather than path. But sometimes the riddles became less mythical when you laid a map on a table and watched your enemies move. "Princess Arianne will be waiting," Quentyn said, glancing toward the shore now where Martell orange banners snapped among the crowd gathered on the planky town pilings. "And Ario, my father may be at the water gardens. It will please him to receive you there. He keeps less pain when fountains are near. He is a careful man." "He is patient," Quentyn corrected. though no rebuke colored the word. Patience in Dorne is not the same as hesitation. The sun's work is slow. The sun still burns. Missandei smoothed her robe. We will go to the water gardens, then. We go to Sunspear, Daenerys said. We step onto their planks the way we intend to set our feet on their stones. The water gardens will make me forget I am meant to rule. She looked again at the city drawn low and long along the point, tawny walls and 3 towers stabbing upward like sun spears. The spear tower plain and pale and severe, the tower of the sun honey golden, the old palace huddled in ochre, the shadow city swallowing their bases like a sand-colored tide. I will not come to my husband's folk as a guest only. Quentyn's eyes softened. As a bride and a queen, then, we can do it so. When the ship slipped its mooring and oars bit, the planky town sprang suddenly alive, a laughter of voices and slapped wood, men and women guiding pole-boats alongside to call offers. Fruit baskets, jars of date wine, carved shells, a child's flute with 3 notes teased from its pipe. Grey worm placed unsullied along the rail, Spurpo. Ents slanted and unobtrusive. Their calm steadied the Dornish, who settled into curiosity rather than fear. A knot of orphans of the green blood, brown-skinned boys and girls with cords of blue river clay twisted about their arms, paddled up to the ladder. A girl with hair plaited in many little braids cupped both hands and raised river water toward Daenerys as if it were wine in a lord's goblet. "Drink, mother," the girl said, her accent thick and musical. "The river says welcome." Daenerys took a mouthful and let it fall back into the cupped hands. The sun lit the water into a bright bead. They both smiled when it slid away. It tasted of silt and leaves, unlike the metallic tang of Meereen's canals or Pentosian fountains, and there was power in it that had nothing to do with her. "I am honored," she said. Missandei murmured to the orphans in a few words of High Valyrian and some of the Rhoynish she had collected, as deft and private as tying a knot. The girl laughed, eyes surprised and pleased. When the ship's ladder went down, it was the orphan flotilla that steadied it. Thin arms braced, sharing the work as if it were a hymn. The pilings shifted underfoot. She had walked on worse. Sea-battered gangplanks in Karth, rotten stairs in Meereen's poorest alleys. But there was an honesty to lumber that does not pretend to be stone. It held because it held, not because anyone told stories about it. She crossed with that thought in her throat, breathing the warm stink of fish and tar and river mud, and the people of Dorne watched her fail to stumble. By the time her boots found sun-baked steps rising from the mud toward the road to Sunspear, the air had the giddy quality of a feast. They were met not by the prince, nor by a priest, but by a woman whose first look was a calculation she made no effort to hide. Dark hair, darker eyes, a way of wearing the heat that made it adorn her rather than bend her. A white silk scarf drifted from her shoulders without any hint she noticed it. When she smiled, the curve of it corrected the testing look as if to say, "Very well, you are what you say you are. Now I will see who else you might be." "Princess Arianne," Quentyn said, and for the first time since he announced himself in Meereen, he sounded less like a petitioner and more like a son and younger brother, complicated and proud. He bowed. "I bring you Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, blood of the dragon, Queen of Meereen, rightful Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, and—" He hesitated and she caught it, the catch where a word wants to change and finds there is not yet a word for the change. "And bride to Prince Quentyn of Dorne, if Dorne will have her." It was said in the open, with the orphans listening and the workmen and the vendors and the guard, and Arianne let the words sit like a bright pitcher on a hot table. Then she dipped her head, enough to acknowledge station, not enough to concede anything more. "You came with 3 dragons," she said. "And with Unsullied. My father keeps a habit of care with people who arrive with armies." She turned her head slightly. A man stepped forward, his axe shaft upright on the ground like a staff. His beard was gray, his arms thick. When he looked at Daenerys, he did not blink. "Areo says the best sort of guest is the one who leaves with the same number of men with which she came. Sometimes one must leave with more," Areo Hoda said, and his voice was slow stone in a riverbed. "If the ones gained are children, children like the water gardens." He turned, and his gaze caught Quentyn and held. If there was affection in it, it lay deep. "My prince," It was well done, Daenerys thought. It folded care into courtesy. It reminded her she was seen and measured, and it made the measure seem less errand of suspicion than craft of hospitality. She let herself laugh, quiet and true. "I mean to leave with the same number of dragons I brought," she said. Now Ariane's smile widened. "Let us make a habit, then, of you saying what you mean and me believing it." She extended her hands, bracelets clinking. "Walk in our heat, Daenerys of the dragons. Learn our shade." The road to Sunspear crossed dust the color of old bone and pocked with low shrubs. The Shadow City sprawled around the citadel like a tawny beast at ease, its lanes maze-like and close-limbed, but trade spilled from it as if from a hem stuffed with secrets. Bolts of dyed cloth, jars of pistachios, dates and green figs heaped in baskets, bowls of sea salt glinting like snow. Children ran with their hair bound up against sweat, bare-legged and sure-footed over cobbles. A woman hammered copper on a sheet placed over sand. The note it made when she struck it seemed to rise into the sky and melt against the heat. Tanner's vats made 1/4 stink worse than any alley in Meereen. A perfume stall 2 streets over floated the scent of orange blossom and sandalwood. They passed a temple where a Rhoynar woman lifted a bowl of river water, chanting. Across from it, a sept's rainbow stones were dulled by dust and sun, its door open to whatever breeze would be so kind. Daenerys noted the equal where both places bore and did not believe for a moment one touched more hearts than the other. People find what cools them. The courts of Sunspear were cooler than the street, though not as cool as the water gardens would be. Yet the archways were cut for shade and the walls thick enough to drink heat before it reached the rooms inside. Spears crossed in the air as the guards bowed. A boy with a swollen lip looked up from the basin he was filling and forgot water to gape at the woman with hair like ash and the dragon shadows scrawled above. In the great audience chamber of the old palace, high windows were cut through to catch sea air. The Prince of Dorne sat in a chair of cedar with its arms worn smooth, his feet planted on the tiled floor as if the tiles were sand and he meant to shift them when they became too hot. He was gaunt, as she had imagined he might be from a lifetime of patience. He was soft-limbed the way men become who are made to sit. His hair was streaked with white, his eyes patient in the way Quentyn had named. On a stool beside him stood a young woman with pale gold hair and pale blue eyes, a sweetness to her features that Daenerys had seen used like a blade in other mouths. 2 guards flanked the prince's chair, one with a round, brutal face and the flat stare of a man who has never forgotten grief, the other with eyes like knives. Daenerys did not need to be told the latter were Oberyn's daughters. The grief belonged to the woman with the soft voice and hands that could cradle or crush. "Illyria," Quentyn murmured under his breath, and the look he gave her was weightless and warm. "She loved him. She keeps loving." Prince Doran rose with care, one hand on the arm of the chair, the other on Ario's forearm like a battle brother's. "Welcome," he said when he stood. He did not say Queen or Khaleesi. He did not say anything else at all for a long, long breath. People who spend their lives waiting never waste introductions. "We are glad the heat does not frighten you." "The heat and I have an understanding," Daenerys said. "I do it the honor of not underestimating it." A ripple of something like amusement went around the court. It did not touch all faces. Obarasan's mouth made a shape like a sneer, and then solved itself into an expression of listening that was combat by another name. Nymeria's fingers tapped once, twice on the pearl handle of a dagger that had not moved. Tyene smiled and kept smiling. Doran's eyes warmed by a degree. "Sit," he said. "Ario, have them bring sweet water, not wine. Let us begin with what we need." She sat and the room exhaled. The cups came. The sweetness in the water was only what water truly tastes like to a body that has trudged through dust. It made her want to lie down between the fountain basins and sleep, and she did not. She did not even let her shoulders relax. She drank and set the cup down and looked at Doran and saw for the first time the hunger in him, which was not Oberyn's hunger and not Viserys. A hunger that had learned to wear coolness like a second skin. It made him careful because it had burned him in some long-ago place where she could not see. It did not make him less hungry. "You sent your son to me with a promise and a plan," Daenerys said, because he had asked earlier for what was needed, and truth is not wine. He won my trust, not because he dazzled, but because he did not try. I told him in Meereen I would wed him if Dorne would have me, and he told me to come and ask. So I ask. You ask to be Princess of Dorne and Queen of Westeros the same day, Obara said. She leaned forward, all impatience molded into the shape of a gesture. The world is full of women who want the sun and the moon at the same time. The sun and the moon do not sleep in the same sky, Nymeria murmured, and the words did not sound like dissent or agreement so much as a habit. But day follows night and night follows day. Tyenne's smile did not curl. Sister, stop playing with proverbs. She looked at Daenerys with eyes like forget-me-nots dropped in milk. Why do you want Dorne's hand, your grace? Because I mean to rule, and I prefer to rule with people who do not bend simply because a weight is placed upon them, Daenerys said. She felt Missandei's breath catch beside her. Approval pressed close behind caution. Dorne stood when others knelt or broke. And because your prince sent me his son when I was surrounded by men who wanted to buy my city or my name. Because the last Targaryen prince married a Dornish princess. And though their bodies were broken, the bond they made pulled this land differently ever after. Because you will not be bought. She held Doran's gaze. Because I cannot be. The prince's hands, resting on the chair's arms, did nothing. His fingers did not twitch. He regarded her with the same mild look one might give a cloud that could be rain or smoke or nothing. When he spoke, it was to Quentyn. Son, he said gently, what do you know of ruling beside this woman who would be queen? Do you know it better than you know the way the water gardens sound when oranges fall? I know her at table and at council and on a windy pyramid stair, Quentyn said. She hears. She changes her mind when it should be changed. She believes mercy is not weakness. She knows when it is. She does not pretend her dragons are not dangerous. She does not pretend she is not. He smiled, quick and excited, surprising himself. She cannot be bullied. Illyria's voice came low and worn thin by salt. What will you do with our anger, your grace? If you come to it and draw it up from its cool bed? If you wake it in our daughters and our sons and our old men alike? What will you do with Oberyn's girls who have turned their grief into the shape of skill? She put a hand around the cup as if it needed comforting. Will you make us more bloody? Will you promise us an end? I can promise you a use, Daenerys said, and I can promise I will make an end when it can be made, and not feed men and women into a fire whose only work is burning. I will not kill children to prove I am not my father. She did not look at Tyrion. He was not here to look at. Her mind supplied him anyway in the corner of a room with a cup in his hand, eyes kind and wicked both. She looked at Illyria and then at Arianne and then at Obara, and what she saw in their faces, defiance, calculation, sorrow, she took in without turning it into a song for herself. You have grievances, so does half the world. I know because I walk through half the world listening to them. I will wage war for a crown not by pretending war is a cleansing fire but by remembering it is a filthy trade that turns poor men into bones and makes proud women watch sons die. I will not forget that when I ride a dragon I scorch fields that someone meant to plant. You will ride a dragon over our passes, Anders Ironwood said from near the wall. She had not seen him before. He looked like a cliff with a beard. Over the Boneway, over Prince's Pass. Fields burn there, too. No, Daenerys said. Not there. I will ride when I must, where I must, on the sea, over the cliffs, in the high air. But the passes are thorns in a little gate. They reward patience. They punish pride. She smiled with one corner of her mouth. So do I. The Prince of Dorne laughed then. A deep, low sound like water turning over in a fountain's shadow. His face changed when he did it, growing younger, losing several layers of history all at once. He stopped quickly before he gave too much away. I told you she listens, he said, to no one and everyone. I told you that when you sent your thoughts dragging hooks through the air as if fish might bite them. He stood again and this time did not need Ario's arm. Dorne will have you, Daenerys Stormborn, he said. We will bring our water to your fire and see what steam can shape. The hall breathed. Obara's mouth didn't move, but her fingers flexed once as if they wanted a spear. Nymeria stopped tapping her dagger and smiled. Tyene gave a sigh small enough to slip under a door. Arianne's eyes were on Daenerys like a black hawk's high above a rock and a hare. What warmed there, warmed with reluctance and genuine excitement both, as if watching a lover lean by chance on a table and make a piece of it into something else entirely by accident. "Then let us make a marriage of it," Arianne said, sudden, spiced amusement in her voice. "Not a war first, not a siege-turned festival, but a wedding. There has been too much ash in our stories. We will begin with sweet, and see if we can keep the bitter away for a while. Yes." For a week the Shadow City became a loom that wove only for that day. 100 hands prepared fountains and tents. 100 pots turned out sugared dates and oranges stewed with honey and pepper. 100 women and men folded and refolded white linen. Daenerys and Quentyn were given separate rooms in the old palace. Cool, with shutters carved so fine the brises seemed like lace. And Ariohota set his men like stones around their doors. Grey Worm spent the mornings at the practice yard with the Dornish spearmen, their light oval shields flashing, their boots stirring dust that rose and then settled as if it meant to paint a picture and could not hold on to any shape. The Unsullied moved as if the heat were a request. The Dornish moved as if heat had raised them. In the afternoons, Missandei took Daenerys to the water gardens. Children laughed there with an abandon that tasted like fruit, and Daenerys stood in the shadow of the tall trees watching them toss oranges in a fountain spray, their dark bodies slick with water and the sun burnishing their hair like pomegranates. Ilaria Sand was there often, sitting with a small boy in her lap, her hands busy weaving reed boats that the child then placed carefully into the fountain's throat and clapped when the current took them. Sometimes she looked up at Daenerys. When she did, she gave that same worn salt smile, and Daenerys returned it and did not try to fill the space between them with promises. On the third day, Arianne surprised Daenerys in a colonnade where a fountain threw twin fans of water like a dancer's veils. The princess wore orange silk and a knowing look. She moved as if the hot air were silk as well and belonged to her. "You will forgive me." Arianne sidled into Daenerys's path and tilted her head, one eyebrow climbing as lightly as an acrobat. "I have spent my life expecting to be the one who is looked at first. It has been a long week." Daenerys smiled. "It must be a relief." "It is a challenge," Arianne said, unabashed. "You are quite certain you want Quentyn?" She made a little moo as if tasting wine that had gone flat. "He is not expressive." "I have had men who were too expressive," Daenerys said, thinking of Dario Naharis with his colored beard and knives in his smile, of Khal Drogo with his braid heavy as the world. "Quentyn says what he means and means what he says. I prefer that I can learn a man's corners by touch rather than by watching for the flash of his knife every time I reach for him." Arianne laughed and clapped her hands soundlessly by bringing her fingers together only enough to suggest it. "You may find Dorne suits you, Dragon Queen. We like plainer cups than most people think. If you pour the right thing into them." The laughter fell away, her eyes sharpened. "There is another claimant. In the Stormlands. He calls himself Aegon. He claims to be your brother's son." Daenerys had already heard it from Quentyn, and from a Myrish trader who thought he would make better coin selling news than silk, and from a letter delivered in a dove-gray tube that spelled its own falsity in how carefully it was scrubbed of anger. Still, hearing Arianne say it slowed her breath. "If he is Elaya's son, I should first put aside my claim and then fall to my knees and kiss the Rhoynar that my brother shamed," she said. "If he is false, I should cut the head off the snake and toss it into the river. It will float. I have seen how that goes." "You will forgive me," Arianne said, and for the first time a note of something like uncertainty crept under the words. "I was once promised to Viserys. It is not a thing I understood then. I was a child and Viserys was a story, but the story sat in my room sometimes in a boy's shape and I dreamed of it. He was not kind to you. He was not." Daenerys found that her hands had made fists without asking her permission. She opened them with intent. He also walked through a city where men laughed and pointed, and he had no one to feed him if he could not coax a kindness from some woman who would be burned for it. He died as he chose. He would not have been kind if he had lived. "I did not love him. I do not miss him." That is a clean answer, Arianne said. "I like the ones you give. See that you keep giving them. Dorne is full of people who prefer to hem and stitch and let the truth take care of itself. It never does." She put her fingers to Daenerys' forearm. "If Aegon is true, Dorne will want him. Dorne will want Elia avenged." "I do too," Daenerys said. "Sometimes the heart makes a thing true because it has needed it for so long. I will not fault you for wanting him. I may have to kill him." She let the weight of it sit whole between them. "Better you hear the full of it now than a softer shape of it later." Arianne looked at her for a long moment, and the amusement went out of her and a steadiness came in. "Then let us be sure together," she said. "I will go see the boy. He has John Connington with him. The Golden Company. They say they mean to take Storm's End. By the Bone Way and through the Marches. It would be a neat plan, if a storm ever let plans stay neat." She tugged her scarf tighter. "You will be wed tomorrow. We can begin the business after." Daenerys dreamed that night of fire and river water, the two making steam that etched her skin with tiny crystals when she woke. The dawn that came was not merciful, and yet a breeze blew from the water that wrinkled the flags on the towers and made the day into something a man could live through without his temper becoming his only company. The wedding was held in the great courtyard under the tower that had given the city its name. Decks of latticework hung with orange blossom and red silk looked like a fruit seller's wagons turned inside out and made splendid by decree. Quentyn wore white linen and a collar worked with a sunburst chased in gold. When he saw her in her gown, he stopped the way men stop when fire moves exactly as they want it to for the first time in a year. In Dorne, the rites were not long. They put their hands into a basin of water and let each other's hands lie there, and then lifted them out and watched the water run down and drip, and they held their dripping hands up so the sun could sink heat into their knuckles and the crowd could see their fingers interlaced. Doran took their joined hands and spoke in a voice that surprised her with its roughness. "Drink each to each," he said, and they did, from a simple earthen cup, and then the cup was thrown into the fountain and sank and then bobbed and then sank again as if making up its mind. When the music swelled, dragons lifted. Drogon's shadow poured over the courtyard like a herald. Gasps ran the length of the gathering. Fear first, then exhilaration, then a kind of foolish giddy joy the way men get when they see something their great-grandfathers never saw and realize for an instant they are those great-grandfathers to someone yet unborn. Daenerys mounted when Drogon came to the tower top and folded himself in the space as if towers had been made to rest dragons. She stood with her bare feet against the heat of his scales and felt the tremor of him. Restless, pleased, barely able to keep himself from tearing the sky to ribbons. She did not call for fire. She raised her joined hands with Quentyn and then opened them, and the crowd below cheered as if loosened from some long knot. Then she let Drogon go, and he went up and up until the sun made squares on his wings like a stained glass window seen from within, and then past it, and she felt the half-conscious shock she always felt when her body learned again how giant a thing she had tethered her life to. The gifts came. House Gargalen offered boats and wine. House Euler scowled and sent 30 hawks with bells too fine for hawks. House Jourdain brought a map drawn on the tanned skin of a calf, its passes traced so delicately that to look at them was to wish to walk them. House Dane sent a blade of pale steel not dawn but worked by a cousin who had touched that starlight once. House Ironwood sent heavy lances tipped like needles and a promise in words that felt like oak. The orphans of the green blood, without herald or prior word, came to the gate with wreaths of reeds and a basket of river stones. Each stone painted with a child's name and a little sun and a little dragon. Daenerys took the basket herself and held it against her body as if it were fragile, and something in the crowd shifted toward her. Jairus Drinkwater danced with Tyene until both were nearly lying. Arch Ironwood lifted 3 small children on his shoulders and walked with them around the fountain until all 4 laughed. Missandei whispered to a scion of House Fowler about books. Grey Worm sat with an unsullied at the court's edge and watched without seeming to watch, then stood and took a hand from a boy half his height who wanted to know how hard the spear is to hold. When night came, it smelled like orange blossom and smoke and the warm salt that comes when the sea breathes. She had known silk canopies, spice tents, rough hides over pegged frames in leagues of sand. The chamber they gave them was stone and linen and a bed like a barge that might carry them across a river in a different world where there were no wars. Quentyn touched her with hands that had learned how to be careful from pages and from boats and from holding a map flat against stubborn wind. He did not try to be anyone else. He did not try to be a dragon. He did not try to be Drogo. She did not ask him to. When she woke with sweat cooling on her skin and the scent of pomegranates in her nose, she thought, "If children are in me now, they will be born between fountains." She did not decide whether the thought warmed or frightened her. She let it be both. There had been too many years when she had been told that the choice she had was to long for a thing that could not happen or to harden her heart so completely that it would refuse anything that did not look exactly like a dream. In the morning, a raven pecked at the world. It arrived from the Tormlands with a strip of parchment tied to its leg and the look of a creature that had flown long and through air that meant to show it knives. Hoda took the bird himself in careful hands and freed the message, handed it to Prince Doran, and stepped back. The prince read with that patience again, and then read once more, and then he set the paper down on the arm of his chair and looked at it as if it were a stain he would not yet clean. "Griffin's roost has fallen," he said. "The Golden Company took it for the boy. He calls himself Aegon. He names himself king. He has taken a great house's seat and planted his banner on their heights. He means to move. He looked to his daughter and his new daughter by law. He means for us to move. It is a message for Dorne as much as it is for the Stormlands." Arianne's eyes were already shining with plans. "I will go," she said. "You will send me. I will look at the boy with my eyes and not another's, and I will bring back word that is not written by a man who hopes for a marriage ban." "Take Nymeria," Obara said. "Toss me with you, but you won't. You always worry I will spear the wrong man." "You spear the right man at the wrong time," Arianne said with a little affection she pretended to hide. "Nymeria will bring her knives. The boy will never see them until they are behind his eyes. I will not have my daughter ride into a camp of Sellswords without a force that is more than pretty steel," Doran said. He raised his hand as Obara's mouth opened. "You will take 100 horse. 200. Quentyn will not go. He will stay here." Quentyn stepped forward quietly. "Father, you will stay," Doran said again. "We will not put you in the path of a life I cannot spare. We just fetched you home and made you something more valuable than any wine in my cellars." Daenerys felt the flicker of anger dance up the back of her neck, and then she put it down. It was care. It made fathers into jailers and kings into cowards, and sometimes it made sense. "I will send Barristan Selmy with Arianne," she said, "and Grey Worm with 100 more unsullied to hold the road behind them. And Jairus and Arch if they will go, because Quentyn will want someone with his smell to stand by her." She looked at the prince. "That is 200 horse, 100 foot who will not break, and a sword who has seen kings fall and stand. If it is a trap, the trapper will find himself gnawing at steel." Doran nodded once. The faintest smile touched his mouth. "You spend your gifts like a man who understands coin," he said. "Take them, Arianne. You will leave at dawn." "If the boy is true," Arianne said, "we will know by the time we smell his stew. If he is not," she grinned, "I will find the seam in the false skin and tug." They left as the heat began to build again. Banners limp as sleep until the air thickened with it and they pulsed. Daenerys watched them ride from the tower and felt the pull in her, the steady drag of wanting to ride too. She put a hand against the wall to keep herself from stepping into something she could not control simply because it burned in her blood to do it. Quentyn stood beside her, a clean shirt clinging to his shoulders. She rested her hand on his forearm, and he leaned into it, and that was a kind of riding as well. The letter that came 2 days later smelled of the sea and of tar and unknown smoke. It was not raven scent. It was placed in Ario's hands by a man whose hair was braided long and whose mouth had that ironborn set to it that said, "I will resist because resisting is the only way I know who I am." He did not say how he got past the guards and the city. He did not say anything at all once he placed the letter and stepped back. But Ario would not let him step far. Doran read the letter and grimaced and then read it again and laughed, short and bitter, as if something had hit him somewhere easy and made him remember he had a nerve there. "The crow's eye," he said. "Euron Greyjoy." And he did not spit only because spitting would have given air to an enemy. He declares himself king of rocks and broken oaths and says he will be a king of dragons if any man will bring him one. He is sailing for Old Town. He is sending ships along the coast to amuse themselves with our villages. He wants us to look north while he steals west. Let him try to amuse himself here, Obara said from the wall. Let him beach his toy boats on our sand. They will not come to Sunspear, Nymeria said. Not yet. They will take poor hamlets where a dragon is not a rumor that makes men slow to rape. They will take a fishing village and brag they took a city. Then we will send to those villages the notion that some places belong to dragons, Daenerys said. We will place a shadow over their boats and teach them to look at the sky properly before they put to sea. She turned to Missandei. Send word to Grey Worm. He will choose a place where our men can move along the coast. Anders Ironwood will send riders who know the sands their best. We will not lumber after raiders like a cow in a market. We will step on them as if killing rats. For the first time, Anders Ironwood's eye brightened with something like respect. I know places where they think the sea is theirs, he said. They will learn it is not. I can put men at Lemonwood and at the Tor and at Salt Shore before the week darkens. Do it, Doran said, and do it without letting them see you do it. We will be the heat, not the light. They waited then with the humming patience of a lizard sunning itself on a wall. Reports came. Sails spotted near Lemonwood, 2 ships beached, oars left in the sand as if the men who held them meant to use them as cudgels if the wind did not favor them on the way out. A fishing hamlet burned at Salt Shore, its timbers popping and the smell of fish in the air for miles. A woman sliced for her necklaces and the blood left on the stones like peeled fruit. Daenerys did not rage aloud, though she wanted to. She sent Regal to sleep on the tower near Salt Shore and Viserion to the Tor, where Lords Jourdain had raised a signal as if kicking at a nest. Drogon she kept with her in Sunspear, restless, unsettled by the flavor of wind that came and went with a regularity that suggested a thing too regular. Like noise that is not noise so much as the suggestion of it. The suggestion made itself manifest 2 mornings after the hamlet burned. Ario's axe gave back the hint of the note before the horns themselves were heard. Scales trembled in Daenerys's breast as if a hand had found a string that connected her to Drogon along a path of heat. Then the sound came, a horn blast that was not music, not law, not any sound learned by men on their own. It was as if a hill had decided to complain about a wound and had discovered it had lungs. The hairs rose on her arms. Drogon's head snapped up. He launched from the tower so abruptly a sentry crouched became suddenly a man without breath at all, clinging to a crenel with both hands and a prayer. The horn sounded again, and she staggered though she was standing still, and somewhere far along the coast one of the dragons answered. Not a roar of anger but a confused keen like a child hearing its mother sung in a voice that was not a mother. Viserion, she said through her teeth, and Quentin's hand was on her arm before she could move. No, do not hold me. I must. Let me hold you, he said simply. If you fall, you will fall farther than I will. Let me give you the ground. She breathed and the horn sounded again. A rise and fall that made the air taste of copper. Grey Worm had already moved. She could feel the pattern as one feels a hand placed on your back to direct you through a crowd. In moments, they were in the saddle, Quentin on a courser light and fleet, Daenerys on a lean mare that knew sand, and Ario and a knot of spears pressed around them like a revolving door that never touched. They did not race. They loped, conserving heat and strength. The horns came again twice, and each time the sound reached into her chest and teased at a thing there that was not bone. Drogon beat the air and screamed back, and she felt him, angry, insulted by a sound that thought it could be him. The Tor rose from the sea like a finger pointing. The beach below was dotted with men in shirts of mail crusted with salt. Their ships bit the sand hard, baking their hulls in the sun as if daring it to do worse. A circle had been set in the sand with stones that had never sat there before. Within that circle 3 men stood, one bare to the waist, one hooded, one wearing a helm built like an open mouth. The bare man held a horn chased with black metal and silver writing that curled like vines gone wrong. His lips were split. Blood shone on his chin and chest and dripped onto his belly in a line she would be able to see in her sleep if she let it in. He set the horn to his mouth again. He blew. Sound staggered the men nearest him and knocked 2 to their knees. Within the circle, The hooded man's gloved hands spread and lifted and spread again. A gesture of welcome to something that had never needed welcome, if it had been true. Drogon shrieked from above and stooped, a spear of fury. Viserion came from the other side, a pale slice against the glitter dark of sea. Both checked in the air like deer catching scent, just for a heartbeat, just long enough that if you had not watched dragons you would not have seen it. And then Drogon flew on and Viserion shied, clawing air in a way that said, "What is this? What is the word you want me to say to that sound?" "Kill the horn," Daenerys heard herself say. It did not sound like her voice. It sounded like a thing that had been waiting in her throat for years, patient, clean. "Kill the horn, not the man." Grey Worm raised a hand. Arrows hummed from the low dune where he had placed archers in the dewy hours before first light. They struck the horn at its mouth and along its body in a clattering, unsatisfying series of skitters. The metal was not made to let shafts bite it. The bare-chested man's eyes rolled white, but he did not lower the thing. He blew again. The hooded figure's hands shaped circles on circles on circles. "Drogon dove, mouth opening." Daenerys lifted both hands over her head, palms outward. Drogon's fire died on his tongue. The men on the beach looked up in a single motion like fish turning as one under a predator. She felt Viserion's hunger and fear both. She felt in Drogon a rage like a thing caged and prodded. She spoke aloud in the harsh syllables that had become comfort to her without her permission. "Soves," she said, "not fly exactly, but obey the sky itself. Take the sky as yours, refuse what is in the earth." Drogon wheeled hard. Viserion jerked in the air as if a string had been tied to him. The horn blew again. Blood sheeted from the blower's nostrils and ran down his teeth. "Make him stop," Quentyn said through his teeth to no one at all. Make him stop his own breath. He was not speaking to her. He was speaking to the Ironborn god or the sea itself or whatever blasphemy the man had given his own wind to. But it felt like he had given her a command, and she loved him for it. She stood in the stirrups. "Now," she called to Grey Worm, and he lifted a flag from where it had been folded against the sand. Two unsullied rose from seagrass where they lay like stones, and a third made a sign to the archers that was nothing like a word and everything like a craft. The next arrow volley was aimed not at the horn but at the circle of stones. They knocked one and then two and then six clean from the sand. The hooded man's hands faltered, his trinity of circles breaking into gestures ordinary and desperate and human. Drogon screamed as if insult had been turned into a thing he could eat, and then he stooped and the horn sound became a wobble, became a whine, became a broken length of dying animal noise. The hornblower's breath gave out. He sagged. He tried again. Blood threw itself out of his mouth. He collapsed over the horn and did not move. The hooded man flung his arms wide and reached for Viserion with a voice that was not a horn and not human either. Tried to be soft. Tried to coax. Viserion hung in the air one heartbeat and then two and then remembered he was not a lamb at a fence and turned on a pin and raked the beach with a designed cruelty that was a relief after so much interference. Men ran. Men burned. Drogon blew fire because he wanted to, not because a horn insisted, and the difference was significant in the way the world is significant when it turns at the end of winter and everything smells slightly less like poison. The hooded man threw himself backward and then sideways and then ran for the water and put himself under it because men always hope water undoes fire even when what burns is not oil but oath in the air. After, there were bodies on the sand and pieces of horn strewn like beetle shells. The Ironborn prisoners they took did not know the man who had blown the horn. He had come with them with a letter from a king who made a crown out of what he stole from other men's heads. He had said he had sailed round the top of the world, that he had seen cities made of glass and a thing that moves under the sea like a god. He had said nothing at all about how much of himself had already gone into the horn. He had taken their blood as a priest takes wine. He had promised them dragons and gold. They bound the horn's dead man's jaw shut and wrapped his lips with linen so that he would not leak on their sand. Then they put him on a bier and set him out for the tide. Daenerys stood beside Quentyn and watched the water try to undo what had been done. It did not undo anything at all. She looked at Anders Ironwood and saw in his face a recognition that had not been there before. Dragons are not toys. He no longer had, behind his eyes, a picture of his son or his sister standing with their hands up at a great beast's head and a rope that had become a garland. He had a picture of a horn turning the inside of a man's mouth into an altar. "Euron will keep blowing," Quentyn said, "from farther away with different mouths. That is what men do when they find a thing that nearly works. Then we will teach the mouths to bleed sooner," Daenerys said. She put her hand on his. His fingers closed on hers in a way that was not possessive and not permission, just a making of something they now carried together. "We have water and we have fire. Between them is steam. There are things you can do with steam that you cannot do with flame or flood. It moves wheels. It drives things forward in a way that seems gentle until you feel the strength of it where it builds." When they returned to Sunspear, another raven waited. Arian's hand had drawn the script, quick and sure. The boy was handsome. She wrote without wasting ink on wordcloth. He carried himself like a prince. Jon Cunnington loved him like a father. He was patient with children and with old women and with dogs and with men who wanted the sometimes easy thing that is a prince's smile. He had a way of looking up the way men look when they are riding under something higher and are measuring how to bring it down. He said he did not want Dorne to bend to him but wanted to stand in the same wind with it. Arian wrote, "I believe he believes it," and then in the next line with the ink still damp, "I am not convinced his believing makes it true." She would go to Storm's End. She would see if the old walls would laugh at him or love him. The men of the marches stirred as men do when a rumor becomes a banner. Randall Tarly was said to be marching. The Tyrell roses shook out their petals and complained about the wind. In King's Landing a bell cracked or it did not crack, and rumor made it both ways. Cersei kept to her rooms, or she paced the walls, or she prayed with the faith that had found its moment to be holy by becoming sword rather than scripture. None of it changed. That summer had laid itself down upon Dorne like a great patient cat and would not stir unless someone threw water on it. "We have to move," Daenerys said to Doran 2 days after the letter came. She said it under the veil of a small fountain so that their words trembled when they touched air. "If the Tyrells fling roses and swords both, the boy will either be crushed and the realm will say, 'Look, the true heir died and your marriage was a carnival trick to gather banners.' And if he wins," Doran said, "they will say, 'Look, the true heir has taken a king's castle and your marriage has put your dragons in a lovely cage by the sea. Your patience will turn on you then," she said. "It will become cowardice in men's mouths, and it will be hard to argue with them because their decision will already have become their truth.' You should have been my daughter," Doran said, and then, before she could answer with the gentleness she would have, "No, you are my daughter-in-law, which is the thing I needed. I have a daughter who is a storm. I do not need a second. I need a storm married to a ship." He sat back and closed his eyes. She waited and did not fill his silence with guesses. He opened his eyes again. "You will not ride over the passes. Not yet. Not until our stores are set along the way, and the water is placed, and the lords are turned from their private little rages and into one big rage that can be pointed like a spear. You will take your dragons north along the coast. You will let them taste the air above the Reach and the Arbor and the Mander. You will let men tell stories about seeing you that have not yet become the kind of stories that make war councils stupid. And Quentyn?" she said, keeping her voice level as if asking for salt and not for her husband's placement in the world. Doran regarded her in a way that made her feel both wade and see. "Ingratulated. Quentyn will go to Starfall," he said. "He will take our letters and our words and our presence there where the Danes hold a piece of a story the realm loves more than is useful to it. He will bring Starfall into our coil. He will learn what men do when they look at dawn and think it means anything in a world where dragons fly. He will come back knowing more than he knows now about how men make oaths when they are blinded by the idea of a hero." Quentyn did not flinch when told. He said, "I had hoped to go with her north," and Doran said, "Your hope is noted." And Quentyn bowed to his father with a care that did not hide either love or frustration. Daenerys said she would go with him to Starfall first, because she had learned the way a realm slides on maps when you lift a piece of it without looking at the places that peace had been touching. They rode west to where the Torrentine cut itself out of stone, and the pale stone castle threw reflections like a white blade dipped into a river. They were met by a boy not yet long out of childhood with eyes so earnest it made her stomach twist. Edric Dane, who had held Dawn for a minute of his life and would hold its memory until he died. He looked at her dragons with awe and no terror at all, and that was dangerous. Still, she liked him. He made her think of the boys in the water gardens throwing oranges and laughing. A Dane with oranges in his mind instead of swords might make the world a different shape. At Starfall, she dreamt of an obsidian mirror lying on a table that was also a river. When she looked into it, steam rose and then cleared, and she saw a woman's masked face and a voice that came from the mirror and the river both. Daenerys did not move. She had learned not to move when dreams ripened like fruit within reach. "Masks cannot keep the sun," Kaith's voice said. It was not her words so much as the echo of them that raked Daenerys' skin. "The Mummer's dragon will shed scales when it is asked for blood. Do not let the sea teach your dragons a language that is not fire." "I have learned some of your lessons," Daenerys said. "I have learned that prophecies are garlands. Men hang them where they want to make a thing prettier to themselves. Then make this thing ugly," Kaith said, "because that is the true shape of it. There is a man with a blue lip who thinks he can play songs for your beast. There is a boy who thinks he can be your son. Move fast. Move as if you are standing in winter and a river is between you and a house with a fire in it. Do not let the horn's echo carry your beasts away from you." The mirror cleared. It showed in it Quentyn asleep with one arm flung above his head, and a look on his face that was not hunger and not peace so much as the thing that comes when a man has done exactly the thing he meant to do with his day and is not ashamed of it. Daenerys smiled against the dark. "I will not let them go," she said. "Not to horns, not to boys, not to anything at all but the sky and my own hand." The parley with Aegon took place outside the Weeping Town because history likes to drop its arguments in the same places it has used before. It was raining lightly, which pleased Daenerys more than she let anyone see. She liked watching men who had gotten used to heat negotiate with a day that would not let them have it. The boy came on a gray gelding with Jon Connington riding to his right like a storybook made flesh, grayer, thinner, eyes almost feverish. Aegon wore plain mail and a blue cloak. The stormlight made him lovelier than he could have been in sun. He was handsome. It did not hurt his claim. It did not help it either. He bowed to her in the saddle and then dismounted and came forward on foot. She did the same. They walked until they stood in the wet grass, where neither side could reach them in 3 heartbeats. It was close enough. "Aunt," he said, and the word tried to be balm and became a lever. "You have come the way I have always hoped you would. It seems we have always been walking toward each other," she said. "I did not know you were there to walk toward." "I was not for a long time," he said, and she respected that answer because it admitted time can turn lies into temporary truths. He lifted his chin. Rain caught on his lashes and made him look faintly absurd and more sympathetic for it, which was a trick kings would learn if anyone would teach them. "I will not beg you," he said. "I will ask you to set your dragons near my banners. I will ask you to frighten Old Town into putting its candles out. I will ask you to let me come into King's Landing at the head of an army and not the tail of a wedding procession. I will ask you to let me be king and you to be queen and for us to be." He spread his hands. "A new kind of story. What if I ask you to kneel?" Daenerys said. She said it as if it were asking for salt again. "What if I tell you my dragons are my argument and my marriage my answer, and the old story is not as broken as it felt when you were hidden to keep you from dying?" "If I kneel," he said quietly, "I make my mother die again. You make your mother die again when you let yourself be killed on a wall that will not fall," she said. "You make her die again every time you open your mouth and say her name to make men trust you. You make her die again every time you make love to a girl because a plan you were taught says it will be nice if you tie Dorne to your bed." She looked at him and he did not look away. "I will not let you make her die again for me." He stood very still. "If I kneel to you," he said after a long time, "what am I?" "You are a prince," she said. "You are my heir until I have a child. You are my brother's son if you are my brother's son, and even if you are not, You are the flame of a story that bent men's lives for 2 decades and will not go out unless we turn it into something that warms us instead of a thing shivering men huddle around and die." She paused. "And if you are a mummer's dragon," she added, "then you are safer on your knees than on a wall." He flinched. He lifted his chin. He set his jaw. "I am not the mummer's dragon," he said. "But you are not wrong. Knees are safer. I have not been taught safety." "Then let me teach you," she said. "Do not mistake me. If you do not kneel, I will come for you with teeth. I am telling you I would prefer not to." She took 1 step closer and lowered her voice. "I would prefer to not put the head of a boy on a spike because a man with a slick voice decided to make you into a spear, and he is better at dragging ropes than you are at cutting them." "I am not his," Aegon said, sudden raw. "I am not anyone's. You are mine if you kneel," she said. And there it was, the thing that cut through plans like a sword through silk. "You are mine, and you will not be less after you kneel, you will be more. Because you will be a boy who decided to live and not a man who decided to make a statue out of his own grave." He drew a breath that might have become a cough or a sob if he had let it go too quickly. He did not let it go. He nodded once as if it were to himself, the way men nod when they are about to step into a river that looks cold. "I will give you my answer in 3 days," he said with an almost smile that made him look like Rhaegar enough to twist an old ache that was not in Daenerys but was in men watching on both sides who loved songs. "There is a storm I must walk in first." "Walk fast," she said. He turned and went and did not look back. Jon Connington stood 1 heartbeat longer, measuring her with eyes that held a fever and a grief that had not been allowed any remedies. He then bowed very small. He said, "This is not easy for me, and perhaps I am learning to be a different thing before I die. And you are dangerous, and I am pleased there is something dangerous that is not stupid left in the world." 3 days later, a raven came with a strip of parchment. "I will kneel if you help me take Storm's End." He wrote it without poetry. Arianne added underneath in her quick hand, He means it as far as boys mean things they have decided to mean." She appended, "I will stay my knives." Then a scribble for now. Daenerys read it in the sunlight by the fountain, and the water threw rings of brightness on the paper. Quentyn stood behind her. He put his palm between her shoulder blades. It was hot and steady. She breathed. "We begin," she said. "We have begun," he answered. They made war then the way Dorne had promised. Slow and careful over the passes with water placed where men would need it, with wagons loaded with grain that did not rot because they did not move in fear, with boy riders sent ahead to gorge in the orchards that men would otherwise burn without thinking. At Lemonwood and Salt Shore and the Tor, Anders Ironwood's men and Grey Worms unsullied slipped ironborn raiders from their boats like spoons from honey and beat them with a softness that did not refuse to break bones. At Starfall the Danes raised their banners and sent a slim column of men who looked like heroes and did not behave like fools. At Sunspear, the orphans of the green blood painted new stones with little dragons and little suns and set them along the riverbank where women who had wept could touch them and feel their grief go somewhere that did not eat them whole. When Daenerys flew north, she flew low over orchards and high over rivers and around the edges of clouds where cold bit tears from her eyes. She did not burn farms. She burned ships that came sneaking down under false colors, burned a Tarly siege tower because Randall had put it too near a granary, and she wanted him to understand she could pluck without slashing if she pleased. She set Viserion to circle above the march of their slow train through Prince's Pass, a pale hawk watching for wolves, and men who thought to profit by selling water were found and turned into drawers of it without coin until their backs learned to hate greed. Long before they reached the Weeping Town again, the realm had decided 2 things at once and without contradiction. The Dragon Queen rode her monsters as if they were horses, and the woman who married Dorne did not like to waste. On the 6th morning of the siege, the sky over Storm's End opened its chest and showed blue. It made every man smile and every woman hum, and it made Daenerys narrow her eyes. Storm's End was a stubborn piece of geometry, built by a man who had decided there would be a place the weather could not move. It did not like to be smiled at. The Golden Company dug like men who thought gold grew in the ground. The Tyrell and Tarly men moved like a garden of steel that had learned to walk and could not yet dance. Aegon came to her tent with Rhaen's memory in his hair, and a face that no longer made boys want to be him, but made men want to follow him into a bad place and see if it could be made better by stubbornness. "I will go up the postern," he said, pointing to a line of stone so ancient and plain you would miss it if you loved decoration. "They say there is a place where the wind cuts around and makes a silence horses hate. It will hate men too. No one will be listening. Half my men will be in the stormbreak. The other half will sound horns here." He smiled ruefully at the word, and both of them thought about a dead man on a beach. "Your dragon will pass above and set the outer towers top to glass just enough to make their men go down the stairs and shout. When they do, we will light their beds." "You are learning to be ugly," she said. "Good. It is not the thing I thought I would like most," he said. "Neither was being a queen. It turns out I prefer it to being a rumor." He looked toward the sea where the light sat like a god. "Do you have children?" he asked then with a strangeness that made the question cold and intimate where it could have been gossip. "Not yet," she said. "Do you want me to have a daughter more than a son? Dorne would like a daughter for this climate. Sons are better in the north. They can cut wood longer." He laughed, a sudden and unroyal sound. "I would like you to have what makes you fierce," he said. "If children will do that, then children. If keeping your husband's hand in yours will do it, then keep it." He looked back at her, suddenly very young. "I will kneel on the battlements if we live," he said, as if it were a private vow to his own bones. "On my knees, as if I prayed." "Very well," she said. "We will make a ceremony. Men love ceremonies. They make them believe they chose the thing that was always going to happen. They took Storm's End at noon because superstition would have preferred dusk. Aegon's men came up the back of the world like thieves pretending to be wind, and Daenerys blew fire across old stone in a line so precise that Barristan, watching from below, began to laugh the way he had laughed the first time a prince he served had set a lance exactly where he meant to and made a better story out of a dull victory. When the gate opened, it opened to dragon shriek and the roar of men who had decided they would not die. The defenders threw oil and then water and a few curses that had been grandfathered in and made the air taste old. It made no difference. In the end, Aegon stood on the gatehouse with his hair blown back and lifted his hand. He did not shout. He simply lifted his hand. His men stopped. The defenders stopped. They all looked at the sky. Daenerys had lowered Drogon to sit with his claws in the outer ring of parapets. He put his head near the wind and let it toss the tip of one horn as if to say, "You may continue to talk." Aegon went to his knees. He did it without ceremony. He did not fear the stone's wetness or its chill. He knelt in a puddle like any groom told to do so by a bride he hoped to live with. He put his palm flat on the stone and then bent his head. He said, with no attempt at being heard by anyone but her, "Aunt," and then aloud, "My queen," sounded clean. It sounded like a bell rung in air that had been waiting for it. Men roared. Men groaned. Somewhere a Tyrell captain tried to be offended in a way that would make him useful later. Doran would be pleased. Daenerys thought this without thinking about it and then allowed herself to enjoy the pleasure of it. She lifted both hands and the sound filled the gap between sea and wall and was not as loud as Dragonfire, but it was of the same family. That night they ate in the outer ward. The rain smelt new again. Tyrion, who had found them like a coin, finds the hem of a pocket one day after someone has decided they lost it for good, lifted a cup and told Daenerys where not to put her feet when they reached King's Landing if she did not wish to light the city from beneath like a lantern. Quentyn sat close, his knee warm against hers. Barristan told a story about a boy he had taught to pick up a sword as if it were a quill. Arianne, who had returned with knives unsullied by blood and a look of fierce, reluctant admiration, leaned and whispered to Nymeria and made her laugh into her wine. When Daenerys walked away from the table to look at the sea, Quentyn followed. He put his hand in hers exactly where he had put it in those first days. He said nothing for a while. They stood until the stars came, and the sea took the reflections and made them its own. "You have changed my country," he said finally. "You have changed the way the sun looks on our sand. My father will tell you no one sees what patience does, but I see this." He looked at her profile as if memorizing a city he had just conquered. "If I am any kind of man at all, It is mostly because you have let me be one near you. You were a man before you reached me, she said. You were a good one. You will be when I am smoke. She turned to him. You should know this. If we live, we will need to break things that matter to make a world that is not a copy. I will ask you for your country's customs, and then I will tell you to keep some and discard others, and we will argue, and I will win sometimes and you will win sometimes, and there will not always be a way to know when we were right. You will have to trust that the thing we are making is not a pyramid with one chair at the top. We have no pyramids, he said, smiling. We have towers. They topple more elegantly. He sobered. I know what you are asking me to be. I do not know if I can always be it. I ask you to tell me when I am not. I will tell you, she said. And you will tell me when my dragons make me stupid. They will, he said. And the honesty of it made the night feel cleaner. And I will. And then you will be wise again. He squeezed her fingers. Then we will go to King's Landing and try not to step where Tyrion says not to. And afterward, she said, feeling the future like heat long before a wind shifts. We will go north. There is a thing there that the songs have been trying not to see because they love lords too much. It is older than horns and older than mummers. It will not care about claims. We will have to teach our men to care about things inside their own bodies more than about banners. He nodded as if she had told him where the river bent. You married a land before you married me, he said. I married a woman whose vows are to the world. You married a woman who vows to make fewer children into bones, she said. That is not the same as a vow to the world. I am not the world's wife. He laughed into the wind and then turned so his lips were against the top of her head and breathed her in as if he could make her scent into a drinkable thing and carry it with him to make deserts easier. No, he said. You are the world's rider. She slept that night with her cheek against his shoulder and dreamed of the water gardens. When she woke, the smell in the air was of sea and dewy grass and old stone wet and drying. She lay very still and listened to the camp unfurl. There were places in the sound where in other camps there would have been weeping. There was not. There were places where men would have told old lies to cover their fear with laughter. There were not. She rose and tied her hair back and put her hand to the notch of her throat and felt her heart tap there. It felt like something knocking politely on the door of a room where a woman had fallen asleep in her clothes and must be woken so that she would not wake with her back aching. It was precise. It was courteous. They rode east again after the banners were gathered and the wounded bound. The Boneway waited and Prince's Pass waited and the sun waited with its unfailed appetite. Dorne waited. It was the way of lands shaped by patience to make even victory into a slow, deliberate pouring. Sunspear's towers rose as if nothing had happened to them while the world had shifted like a bowl carelessly tipped. The Shadow City sprawled, and the water gardens sang, and children wove reed boats and set them sailing, and men rolled barrels of oranges into the sands where they would not spoil. When Daenerys mounted the steps to the Tower of the Sun, the air felt as if someone had cut an apple in another room. She reached the top and the wind took a strand of hair and pulled it across her mouth. Doran sat there with a cushion under his arm and his fingers resting on the wicker of his chair, as if determined not to be surprised by his own happiness. Arion stood beside him with eyes clear and hard as river stones. Ario stood near in a piece of shade he had purchased by standing in it all afternoon. Ilaria looked up and did not smile and did not frown, and Daenerys liked her the better for it. The snakes sat like toys someone had set down and forgotten to pick up, but that would spring into someone's hand the instant it needed them. We will go on, Daenerys said. We will go on, and we will not let horns or boys make us forget the shape of what comes after. And what comes after? Doran asked, and it was not a challenge but a steadying bar laid across a barrel to keep it from rolling. After comes the work of making men remember winter in summer and summer in winter, she said. We will bring water into places that have forgotten what it tastes like. We will bring fire where there is rot. We will not bring either to places whole and call it mercy. We will punish. We will forgive. We will grow oranges. We will melt crowns and make pots out of them that women can cook with. We will not say we are the first to think this. We will say we are the ones who did it and did not tire. Doran's mouth lifted. It was not a smile, not entirely. "We will be told we have betrayed our fathers," he said. "Our fathers are dead," she answered, and then softened it because she could see the ache in his eyes that was Elia. "We will feed our children." In the evening she went to the water gardens and sat with her feet in the basin. The stones were warm from the day. The water was cool and a little viscous on her skin, as if it carried more memory than other water. A little boy came to her and gave her a stone roughly painted with a dragon that looked like a bird with too many wings. She thanked him with an extravagance she hoped would embarrass him into laughing. He ran, then stopped, came back, and put another stone in her palm. This one had a sun on it. He looked at her with a seriousness that did not fit his mouth and then scamped away as if his seriousness embarrassed him. Quentyn came then and sat, his boots sending little silver ripples into the basin. He did not speak. They watched the last of the day do its best and fail. The first bats stitched the air above the garden and made a fine lace of it. Dorne hummed around them the way a hive hums before a honey flow. "You will go to King's Landing," Quentyn said. "You will go with my father's patience and my sister's knives and Ario's steady hand and my love, which I am learning is not a chain at all but a thing that makes room. And you will come with me," she said. "When the passes are finished being fed," he said. "When the water has been placed. When Ander sends word that he has done what you asked without telling you there were 10 men who would not do it and he had to toss them into the river. I will come. And I will stand at the base of the hill when you fly, and I will look like a man who is not worried, and then I will pray the sort of prayer a man prays when he believes in nothing and loves a woman who rides fire." She slipped her wet toes along his ankle. He startled as if something had bitten him and then laughed at himself. "I have been in hotter places than this," he said. "We will go to colder places still," she answered. She lifted her hand and watched the water run down it, dripping into the pool and breaking the mirror there. She watched her face break and then heal a dozen times. "When we stand in those places, we will bring a memory of fountains." They sat until the dark made a skin over the pool and the dragon shadows passed over it and rippled it into something that would, one day, become a story that people told themselves to believe in, a thing that could be kind and terrifying at once. The night gathered itself like a cloak and Dorne breathed beneath it, and above all the breath and under it too, the slow, steady pulse of an old land made itself into a drum for their steps.